Like my brother changed the locks, I was holding a single garbage bag, not a suitcase, not a duffel bag. A black 30-gallon trash bag, the kind you use for yard waste, and inside it were the only things he decided were worth giving back to me. A few shirts, one pair of jeans, my charger, my laptop, and for reasons I still cannot explain, my grandmother's wooden recipe box. He stood in the doorway of the house we had both grown up in, the house my parents had paid off 20 years ago, the house I had been living in and managing since my mother's health started declining, and he told me I had 45 minutes to get out. It was 11:30 at night on a Tuesday in July. His wife was sitting on the couch behind him. I remember she had a glass of white wine. I remember she was smiling at her phone. "You're not on the deed," my brother said. He said it like he was reading from a legal document. Flat, final, like he had been practicing it. "I'd been living here for 3 years," I said. "I took care of Mom, and we appreciated that." He didn't look at me when he said it. "But the house transfers to me. The estate is settled. You got what you got." What I got was a storage unit in Bakersfield. That was it. My parents had been gone 18 months by then. First my father, then my mother, 6 months after, like she simply decided not to stay without him. And the estate attorney had read the will and my brother Wesley had received the house in Pasadena, the investment accounts, and the life insurance payout. I had received a storage unit in Bakersfield and a parcel of raw land somewhere in the high desert outside Victorville that my father had bought in 1987 and apparently never done anything with. My brother had laughed when the attorney read it out loud. Not cruelly, or maybe it was cruelly, and I just didn't want to see it yet. He laughed like it confirmed something he had already believed about me. That I was the one who didn't matter. That my parents had known it too. I didn't argue. I signed the paperwork. I went back to the house in Pasadena and told myself I would figure it out. That was my first mistake. The second was assuming Wesley would give me time. He called me on a Monday, told me his wife Camille had been wanting to redesign the house and they were starting immediately. Could I be out by the weekend? I said I needed more time. He said the weekend. I started packing. I was 3 days in, still trying to figure out where I would actually go. I had been freelancing as a bookkeeper for 4 years, working from home, no office to retreat to, no lease anywhere. And I had narrowed it down to a month-to-month room in Glendale, or a friend's couch in Echo Park. Then Tuesday night happened. He came home with Camille. She wanted to start measuring rooms. I was still in the middle of going through the hall closet. "I need the weekend," I said. "We agreed." "We didn't agree," Wesley said. I said the weekend. "It's basically the weekend. It's Tuesday, Lacey." He said my name the way adults say it to children who are being slow. "This is our house now, we need you gone." That was when Camille walked past me like I wasn't there and started taking photos of the living room walls. I put everything I had left into the trash bag. I walked out the front door. Wesley locked it behind me before I reached the end of the driveway. I sat in my car for a while. The street was quiet. The jacarandas my mother had planted along the curb were blooming. She had timed them to bloom in June and July. She was precise about things like that. And the purple flowers were dropping onto the sidewalk in the dark. I didn't cry. I want to be clear about that. I have done a lot of things in my life that I'm not proud of. A lot of ways I made myself smaller to keep the peace, but that night I didn't cry. I sat in my car and I thought about where I was going. The storage unit in Bakersfield was an hour and 45 minutes away. I had the key on my keychain. I had never actually been there. I drove north on the 14 and then east, and I got off the freeway just past midnight and followed the GPS to a facility on a commercial strip between a tire shop and a self-storage place that had gone out of business. The unit was in the back row, number 34. The padlock key turned on the second try. I pulled the door up. I don't have a word for what I felt when I turned on my phone flashlight and looked inside. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't even curiosity. I was exhausted, and it was after midnight, and I was 29 years old, with a garbage bag in one hand and no bed to sleep in. And what I mostly felt was tired. The unit was about 10 by 15 feet. It smelled like motor oil and old cardboard. There were shelves along one wall with labeled bins. The labels were in my father's handwriting, which hit me harder than I expected. A chest freezer in the back corner, unplugged. Some folding furniture stacked on one side, and in the center of the space, covered by canvas tarps that had gone stiff with dust, were 3 large shapes. I pulled the tarp off the first one. It was a motorcycle. Old, chrome, beautiful in the way that only things made before everything became plastic can be beautiful. I didn't know what it was yet. I took a photo. I pulled the tarp off the second shape. It was a car. Long, low. The kind of proportions that made my brain go quiet for a second. Dark green, almost black in the flashlight. 2 doors. The chrome on the grille was perfect. I had never in my life cared about cars, bookkeeping, spreadsheets, client invoices. That was my world. But something about this one made me stop moving. I took another photo. I pulled the third tarp. Another car. Red this time. Lower, wider. A hood scoop. Round taillights I somehow recognized from somewhere in my memory without being able to name what I was seeing. I stood in that storage unit for a long time. My father had never mentioned these, not once. My mother had never said a word about a storage unit in Bakersfield. I had managed their finances for the last 2 years of her life. Bill pay, insurance, property taxes, and the storage unit fees had come out of the household account as an auto-pay labeled simply, Storage Bequest, and I had never thought to ask. I took photos of everything, every angle I could manage in the dark, the VINs on the dash, the plates, the decals on the engine. I photographed my father's labeled bins, spare parts 67, manuals plus titles, service records. I opened the bin marked manuals and titles and found 4 manila envelopes, all sealed, all dated in my father's handwriting. I took those with me. I slept in my car that night, reclined in the driver's seat with the windows cracked, parked outside the storage facility. I had a bottle of water and a granola bar I found in the center console. The Bakersfield night was warm and flat and smelled like agriculture. I did not sleep much. By 7 in the morning I was sitting up with the envelopes open on my lap and my phone in my hand, and I had spent the previous 3 hours reading every title document, every service record, every note my father had made in his careful accountant's handwriting. And I had done enough searching online that I was fairly certain I understood what I was looking at. The motorcycle was a 1969 Honda CB7A. My phone told me that one had recently sold at auction for over $40,000. The red car was a 1970 Dodge Challenger RT 440 6-pack. I found a Barrett-Jackson result from 8 months prior. A matching numbers example had gone for $210,000. The green car took me longer to identify. The VIN prefix was unfamiliar. I searched the photo I had taken of the engine bay. Then I found a forum thread, and the thread led me to a specialist website, and the specialist website led me to something I read 3 times before I believed it. It was a 1969 Pontiac Firebird Trans Am Ram Air IV, one of 69 ever produced that year in that configuration. Complete, original, documented, and according to my father's records, fully restored in 2009 by a shop in Burbank that no longer existed. I looked up the last option result for a Ram Air IV in comparable condition. The number I found was $425,000. I sat in my car in a Bakersfield parking lot and I did not move for a while. My father had been a quiet man. An accountant like me, which I had always thought was the most mundane inheritance I could have received. He fixed things. He kept records. He paid attention. He had spent his whole life paying attention to things that other people walked past. He had never told me about these cars. But he had left me the key. I called a friend of mine, Becca, who I had met in college and who worked in insurance now, and I asked her whether she knew anything about insuring classic vehicles or who I should call. She didn't, but she knew someone who did, and by noon I had a name and a number for an appraiser in Glendale who specialized in collector cars. I drove to Glendale and slept on Becca's couch that night. I did not tell her what I had found. I said I needed to figure out some things with my parents' estate. The appraiser came to the storage unit 3 days later. His name was a detail I won't go into, but he was in his 60s, drove a pickup truck, and when he pulled back the tarp on the Trans Am, he made a sound I can only describe as involuntary. He walked around the car twice without speaking. He crouched and looked at the undercarriage. He opened the hood and spent 10 minutes in there. When he stood up, he looked at me differently. "Where did you get these?" he asked. "My father left them to me." "Do you have the paperwork?" I handed him the manila envelopes. He spent another 20 minutes reading through them. He looked up twice, looked at me, looked back down at the papers. "I need to make some calls," he said. "But preliminary. I think you're looking at somewhere between 500,000 and 800,000 for all three, depending on where you sell and how you handle it. The Trans Am is the piece. If you go to the right auction house, that car alone could hit $500,000 on a good day." I nodded. I kept my voice level. "What would you recommend?" I said. "Bonhams or RM Sotheby's," he said. "Either one. For this quality, you don't want a regional house." I had taken meticulous care of my parents' finances for 2 years. I knew how to read a contract and how to ask a question. I called Becca's husband that night. He was an attorney, estate planning, not the right specialty but smart enough to point me in the right direction. And by the following week I had a real attorney on the phone and a consignment consultation scheduled with RM Sotheby's in Los Angeles. I did not tell Wesley. I want to be very precise about why. It wasn't revenge, not yet, not consciously. I just had a very clear understanding that the storage unit had been left to me specifically, that the title documents were in my name, and that my brother had laughed when the attorney read that part of the will out loud. He hadn't asked about the storage unit. He had not once in 18 months asked me what was in it. He had taken the house and the accounts and the insurance money, and he had given me a trash bag and changed the locks, and somewhere inside my chest something had quietly rearranged itself. I stopped thinking like a daughter who had been cheated. I started thinking like someone who had a job to do. I contacted a logistics company to handle transport, enclosed trailer, climate-controlled, fully insured. I arranged for professional detailing and photographic documentation. I reviewed the consignment contract 3 times with my attorney before signing. I opened a new bank account in my name only. I found a furnished studio in Burbank month to month, nothing fancy. And I moved in with my garbage bag and my grandmother's recipe box and my laptop. I told Wesley I was staying with a friend. He did not ask which friend. The RM Sotheby's auction was in the fall. I drove to the preview event in a dress I had bought at Target, and I stood in that room full of people in expensive shoes, and I watched people walk past my father's cars and slow down. I watched a man in a blazer stop in front of the Trans Am and stand there for almost 4 minutes without moving. The Trans Am sold for $487,000. The Challenger sold for $198,000. The Honda sold for $44,500. My attorney was at the auction with me. When the final hammer came down on the Honda, he put the running total on a notepad and pushed it across the table to me. After fees and commission, I had cleared just under $640,000. I remember very precisely what I did in that moment. I looked at the number. I looked at the room full of people who had no idea who I was, and I thought about my father. His handwriting on those manila envelopes, the careful labels on the storage bins, the way he had spent 30 years buying and keeping things that other people underestimated. And I thought, he knew exactly what he was doing. I didn't understand it at the time. I thought he'd just left me scraps. I think now he knew Wesley would take everything visible. He had hidden the real thing somewhere Wesley would never look, because Wesley had never in his life done anything that involved dirt or patience or delayed gratification. My father knew his children. I paid off a portion of outstanding debt and set aside taxes. I started looking for a small business to purchase. I had been freelancing for 4 years. I understood cash flow and margins. I knew what I was looking for. 6 months later, I bought a small bookkeeping firm in the San Fernando Valley, whose owner was retiring. 11 clients, 2 employees, solid recurring revenue. I did not contact Wesley during any of this. He contacted me. It was February by then. about 8 months after he had handed me the trash bag in the driveway. He called on a Sunday, which meant Camille wasn't in the room, which meant this was not a joint decision. I've been thinking about the estate, he said. Okay, I said. I want to revisit the property in Victorville. I waited. I know you got that parcel too, he said. Raw land out there, probably not worth much, but I'd like to consolidate. I'll give you something for it, fair market. I said. What made you think about it now? There was a pause. I'd been doing some research. He had looked it up. Sometime in the past 8 months, Wesley had finally thought to research what my parents had actually left me. And whatever he had found had made him call me on a Sunday when his wife wasn't around. He didn't know about the cars. I was certain of that. The storage unit was not public record. The auction results were public, but he would have had to know to search for them, and Wesley didn't know what he didn't know. He was calling about the Victorville land. I'll think about it, I said. It might be more valuable than it looks, he said. With the expansion out there, the solar projects, I said I'll think about it. He was quiet for a moment. Mom would have wanted us to work together on this stuff, he said. I thought about our mother, about the 3 years I had spent taking her to appointments, managing her medications, handling her bills, staying in the house so she wouldn't be alone. I thought about Wesley flying in for Thanksgiving and leaving after 2 days. I thought about the way he said we appreciated that when he was handing me a trash bag. I'll be in touch, I said, and I ended the call. I did call him back 2 weeks later. I had spoken to my attorney. I had done my own research on the Victorville parcel, which it turned out was sitting adjacent to a tract that a solar energy company had been quietly acquiring for a project that had just received its county permit. My father had bought that land in 1987 for $11,000. I had it appraised before I called Wesley back. The appraiser's number was $340,000 at current market, with significant upside if the solar acquisition continued. I did not sell it to Wesley. I called him back on a Tuesday evening. I told him I had done my research on the parcel and I was going to hold it. I thanked him for bringing it to my attention. That's Lacey, come on, we're family. I remember the exact feeling in my chest when he said that. Not anger. Clarity. Yes, I said. We are. And then I said, Wesley, I want to tell you something, not to hurt you, just so you know. He waited. The cars in the storage unit in Bakersfield, Dad's collection, I sold them at auction in October. Silence. The Trans Am, the Challenger, the Honda. Silence. The Trans Am, the Challenger, the Honda. Total, after fees, came to just under $640,000. More silence. Longer this time. I used that to set up a business, I said. I'm doing well. I have an attorney and an accountant and I own property. I'm going to be fine. I could hear his breathing change. Those were in the storage unit. They were left to me. The titles were in my name. It was all legal and documented. I didn't know. I know you didn't, I said. You didn't ask. He started to say something else. Something about fairness, about what Mom would have wanted, about having a conversation. I let him talk for a moment. When there was a pause, I said, I have to get back to work. Take care of yourself. I hung up. He called back twice that night. I didn't answer. He sent a text that I read and didn't respond to. His attorney sent a letter the following week asserting that the storage unit contents may have been marital property or improperly allocated in the estate. My attorney replied in 4 paragraphs citing the will, the title documents, the dates of registration, and a very polite suggestion that proceeding further would be inadvisable. We have not spoken since. I think about my father sometimes when I'm in the office early in the morning. Before my employees get in, when it's just me and the spreadsheets and the coffee I make in the small kitchen in the back. He would have liked this, I think. The quietness of it. The patience. The fact that it all came down to paperwork. Titles and appraisals and consignment contracts and legal responses, and that I had spent my whole adult life learning exactly the skills I needed to handle it. He didn't leave me the house. He didn't leave me the money. He left me the thing Wesley would never value, hidden in a place Wesley would never go. documented in a way that would hold up in any court in the state. My father was an accountant. He did not make mistakes. The Victorville parcel is still mine. I get an offer on it about every 3 months now. I have not sold it yet, I am in no hurry. My business turned a profit last year. Not a dramatic number, not auction house numbers, but a real one, built month by month, client by client. I have 3 employees now. I am looking at a second acquisition. I still have my grandmother's recipe box. It sits on the counter in my apartment, a real apartment now, a lease in my name, a place I chose because I wanted it, and not because it was the only thing left. The box has index cards inside it in my grandmother's handwriting, recipes for things like persimmon pudding and Hungarian goulash and a lemon icebox pie that I have made exactly once, and that was transcendent. My grandmother had also been underestimated, from what I understand it. My grandmother had also been underestimated. I think about that too. The jacarandas in front of the house on Marengo Street are probably blooming again this month. I don't drive past there. I don't need to. I have enough. I've thought a lot about why my father didn't just tell me. He was not a secretive man in the ways that matter. He paid his taxes. He called when he said he would. He kept every receipt in a labeled folder going back to 1984. If you asked him a direct question, he gave you a direct answer. So the fact that he never once mentioned the storage unit, the cars, the manila envelopes. I used to think that was an oversight, now I think it was the most deliberate thing he ever did. He was watching. That's the part I understand now that I couldn't have understood at 22 or 25. He was watching how Wesley moved through the world and how I moved through it, and he made a calculation. Not a cruel one, a practical one. The kind an accountant makes when the numbers don't lie. Wesley would have sold those cars the week the will was read. He would have taken the money and absorbed it into a lifestyle that was already spending faster than it was earning, and in 3 years there would have been nothing left of it. Not a business, not a foundation, just a nicer kitchen renovation and maybe a lease on something with a German badge. My father knew that. He also knew that I would sit in a parking lot in Bakersfield and research VIN numbers until I understood exactly what I had. He knew I would call the right people. He knew I would read the contracts before I signed them. He didn't give me the easy thing because he knew I didn't need the easy thing. He gave me the thing that required me to show up as my best self in order to claim it. That is not luck. I want to be clear about that because I think there's a version of this story that sounds like luck. Girl gets handed treasure, everything works out, and that's not what happened. What happened is that I had spent 10 years building skills that nobody in my family took seriously, and those skills were exactly what the moment required. The careful reading, the patience, the ability to sit with uncertainty and not make a panicked decision. Wesley laughed at my inheritance because he was measuring it by what it looked like, and he had never once in his life looked past the surface of anything. That's the real divide between us, I think. Not money, not favoritism. Just the fact that some people move through the world looking for the thing that's already obvious. And some people have learned, out of necessity, usually, to look at what everyone else walked past. I don't have a clean moral to hand you. I don't think life works that way. What I have is this. Wesley's choices cost him. Not because the universe punished him, but because arrogance has a very specific operating cost, and he had been running that tap for years without noticing. The locked door, the trash bag, the refusal to ever once ask what was in a storage unit he could have looked into at any point. Those were not just unkind acts, they were expensive ones. And my choices, the hard ones, the quiet ones, the ones nobody saw, had been accumulating interest the whole time. My grandmother's recipe box is still on my counter. I think about her more than I used to. She built something from nothing in a time when that was considerably harder for a woman to do, and then she passed what she knew down in the form of index cards in a wooden box that nobody thought to fight over. The things worth keeping are rarely the ones people fight over. That's the only lesson I've got. It took me a long time and a parking lot in Bakersfield to learn it, but it's mine now.